And I know you said that I'm not the one. Well, you said I do have more camera experience than you. Have you ever done any kind of BS reality shows or any kind of like weird spoof stuff like that?
No, I always wanted to go on The Amazing Race, but my wife will never like try out for it. She doesn't want to like jump out of an airplane or anything like that. So no. The most quote unquote camera time I've had was I did the NHC final table coverage 1 year. But other than that, no. This should be a nice fun experience where I'm kind of going outside my comfort range here. So excited to do this.
I mean, you deserve attention, brother. And that's one of the things where I feel like horse players that work hard at this a lot of times. And I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about so many good players out there. So many guys that have dedicated their life to horse racing, or their lives. And I love what you've done. And it's funny because I saw you at NHC when I was at the table like near you, and I didn't even really know much about you, but I just stopped and said hello real quick. I probably talked to less than 5 people, and then here you are back in my life.
And it's funny. It was one of those funny things in Vegas because I mean, you get done with everything. It's like a long weekend and everything, and we have the dinner. But it was really cool. It's always cool meeting. We play a lot of online contests, and you see the names, and you've never met those people before. You're a little bit of a different situation in that, like, saw you on TV before anything else. So, when you came up and just so many people
Did you watch the show?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like so many people watch the show. And I do have to say, I went into it when I read about it at first, I was just kind of like, I'm worried this is going to be a disaster. And then I watched it and it was really good. I was very pleasantly surprised. I think the more horse players you meet, there are a lot of good personalities out there. And, I think it was 7 of you like to kind of follow each of your journeys, and they did a really good job of kind of getting so many different personalities. It was a cool watch. So,
I mean, I'm still kind of bummed the way they kicked off a couple of people on the show, like when they did the pilot, and that's how the show came to be. Was there was a pilot done at NHC, and they were talking to everybody, and I was one of the younger guys, and I talked about, knowing a lot of DJs, going to Burning Man, and being in the conscious community. And one thing led to another. We did this pilot, and then the network dumped them. Like literally all the cast members that were in the pilot got a note saying, "Oh, sign this contract right away and you can be on the show." And then we sign it, and then all of a sudden we find out that the original production company, they just got bumped. And then they bumped a guy that would have been John Hurd. I don't know if you've ever seen him.
Yeah, Hurricane.
Yeah, he's fun, dude. He ended up, I found the original pilot of the show and I gave it to him. I hadn't seen it. It was buried in some computer, and he is in the original pilot. So there's a Horseplayer show with John Hurd in it, with a couple of guys from kind of redneck dudes from like Arkansas out there. And I can't believe they got dropped, but it was, reality TV is exactly that. It's just, they have total creative control, and, I was playing up a lot of the hippie stuff, which is true, but you got to make it interesting. And I just didn't want to lose on that show, like every contest, and it was one of those things where, you have pressure. Like I had to help. I was a aficionado for a wedding once, and that's real pressure when you're on a television show. It's like, they're just waiting for you to say this one thing that they're going to use against you. And yeah, but I'm glad you watched it. I think it's on Amazon now, but it's I've watched it twice. I'll probably watch it a third time now that you said that, just because it's been a while. But
I will say this might sound like a weird thing. Like I've told people this, but like anytime I've done even the video I did with you on Saturday after the contest was over, anything I've done where like I'm speaking like on a podcast or like a video or something like that, I never go back and watch it. And it's funny. I remember like I used to watch like a lot of like late night talk shows, and they would have actors on, and they would say, "Yeah, I don't watch my TV show. I don't watch my movies or whatever," like things like that. And I always thought that was weird. And then once I started doing any little bit of stuff, I was like, I know what I sound like. I know what I look like. I don't think I really want to sit there for an hour and listen to myself, but hopefully I can provide some good content. Like I friends of mine will watch stuff and they'll go, that was pretty good. You shouldn't be so hard on yourself. But yeah, I might not watch this, but my wife will watch it and she'll let me know whether I sucked or not.
Well, I mean, to me, you can't suck. And I'm not talking about your game. I'm talking about if you're a person that's authentic and you're true to yourself, half the people are going to hate you, half the people are going to like you. Maybe in my case, 80% of the people might hate me, whatever. But the point is, when you are who you are, like, I don't think you should ever apologize. So I think it's been cool. You've been always very upfront, very candid, very polite about things. But I do, I think I'm going to challenge you a little bit more than probably you're used to, because everyone's, in awe of you. And I'm not.
This is a very new thing, by the way.
It's I guess you're what, actuary by trade, tournament killer by night. Like, how did that happen? Like, I know you talked a little bit about this before, but do you just have a mathematical mind and you love looking at risk and you love day trading and you love poker and you love all games of gambling? Or was there something about horse racing that is like, dude, I think I can beat it. I think I have an edge.
Yeah, like a lot of people, like either you grew up in a family that was like associated with horse racing or maybe gambling on horse racing or whatever. That was not my case, but the other option for a lot of horse players is that you grew up near a track. So I grew up near Saratoga, and that's just kind of how I kind of got into the game. I was I'm still a nerd. I'm a nerdy adult, but I was a nerdy kid as well. And I liked all sorts of like number puzzles. And once I got my hands on a racing form, that was, just seemed like every day I could be indulging in these number puzzles. So that was kind of the start of it. I used to play poker for a while. I was decent, but I also knew I wasn't like pack up your bags and, move to Vegas, that type of level of playing. So, but yeah, it's one of those things that there's kind of been the more I talk and with people, the more I realize there's kind of like this thread of horse racing through my life. And maybe part of my recent success is that I've instead of kind of fighting it as like, it's like a degenerate gambler type thing, it's more of an embracing it and being like, this just kind of feels meant to be in a certain way, not the winning part necessarily, but just playing and hanging out with the guys and making friends with all the contest players. It just all feels very natural to me.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have the chops, and that's the thing, is if you don't have the chops, you're not gonna win at this game.
Yeah.
And you've done everything in your life to get you to this moment, in the sense that when you can win that many games that are, I think the mythical games are much more difficult, especially given that there's like anything can happen, like in the sense that anybody can take the same horses and things like that. I think that's a big inhibitor. So you have it in your blood and your brain and your DNA. I'm curious, are you somebody that is very, very methodical, and that you go to the gamble, you've got your 3 or 4 horses, kind of like me, and you have your horses, you have your calls, you have your hot takes, and you're just kind of looking at the odds, basing it on those 3 or 4 horses? Or are you playing it more like an audible approach? Obviously, you talked about the scratches that threw your game plan off, but once the scratches were in, you knew you had to have a plan. So I'm curious, like, how much is it? Is it like 80% math and 20% feeling, or how do you kind of break that down?
When I used to play poker, everybody would assume that I was like always just like calculating pot odds, like to an exact amount and all that sort of thing. But I always felt like I was a little bit more feel than people gave me credit for. I kind of feel the same way with this, is that if the math kind of comes naturally, like more of what I'm thinking about during contests is kind of the feel. Should I be playing certain races? Is this, you can have a plan that this horse is going to be 10-1 and you're going to make a big score, but then it opens up 3-1. Now what do you do? So I've always kind of been good about having multiple plans. I'm not always super flexible with those plans. Like I might go plan A to plan B, and then it should be something kind of like in between those two things. And I think that's something I did
Okay.
really well this past week where I messed up big time on Friday, and kind of having that like mistake on Friday made me more aware on Saturday to kind of like loosen up and be a little more, aware of what was going on in the moment, and adjusting when necessary.
Yeah. Do you play the mythical games the same way you play cash, or do you just play it based on you just try to target higher price sources, or what?
I play them pretty similar. I don't play a lot of favorites. I'm always trying to find value
Mhm.
horses. That last race on Saturday was a weird one where I knew who the three favorites would be, and I just couldn't see. I couldn't see anybody else hitting the board. To be honest, it just felt like those
Mhm.
three and some combination, and just kind of go with it. Um, yeah, it's to me, I've always been someone who in sports roots for a little bit more like the underdog teams. I've always been like March Madness is my favorite thing because you get to see the Cinderellas win. They take on the big guys and every now and then they win. And I kind of view horse racing the same way. It's much more gratifying to me to find a 15-1 shot that wins than to be than to be talking with friends and saying, a 2-1 shot is going to win each of the first three races.
I mean, Trendsetter is going to be your $100,000 horse for the rest of your life. So that could warrant a tattoo. Um, it could warrant a hat. It's funny because I was
I
partying
used
with.
to make, I used to make lots of T-shirts for the NHC, and I can send you over text some of the doozies I've made over the years, which include,
What?
like, I get arguments about this. One says worst NHC player ever, and I haven't worn it again, but I wore it the 1 year out at the NHC because I've never made it to day three, and I've played 13 times and I've never made it to day three alive. So I wore this shirt that said worst NHC player ever, and I would say like 1 to 2 dozen people come up to me, laugh at the shirt, and say, I'm sure you feel like you're the worst one, but like you're not. Like I've done worse at the NHC. But what I did was I put all my results on the back because like if you go on the NHC page, it shows like all your results from from the various years.
That's awesome.
So I put that on the back and I turned around and not a single person after reading the back like disputed that I was the worst. So I've done well on the tour, but the actual NHC, I've struggled a ton. I have one that's like the Animal House 0.0 shirt. My friend Darren Yarwood, like, if I die tomorrow, he's going to hope that that's in the will and that it's going to him because he loves that shirt so much. Getting zero in the NHC is actually harder than ending up with like $5. Like just randomly, you would think you would, hit a win or a place somewhere along the way. That's just the way it goes sometimes. So I've always tried to have fun with it, and maybe Trendsetter will be a shirt for next year. It's a good idea.
Yeah, it's like the toilet bowl in fantasy football. But I mean, like, I think that that's part of one of the things that helps your game is this like creative aspect. It's kind of like an artist. It's like the artist way. Like what your shirt does it say? Pressure is a privilege.
Pressure is a privilege, which is a famous quote at the U.S. Open when the players walk out onto Arthur Ashe Stadium. It's a Billie Jean King quote.
Mm.
So they all pass by that when they go out onto center court. I've never been to the U.S. Open before, but whenever I've seen this on TV, it always kind of resonated with me. And then over the past 2 years, it's resonated more than ever because certainly last year with two different tours, like trying to win two different tours, those contests don't overlap. The schedules don't even overlap. Like one's January to December, one's March to February. There were all these moments where it felt overwhelming, and I had to remind myself that that's what I wanted. The last decade before that, I wasn't in the running for a lot of those things. And when you get to that point where it just kind of feels overwhelming, to just kind of like take a breath and say, this is what you wanted. We're gonna buckle down and kind of get through this. So I again, like I didn't make this shirt myself. Luckily, that was already something you could purchase online. But yeah, it's probably my favorite saying, and it's on my my laptop screensaver as well. So.
It's funny. I started making hats and shirts. I've done this kind of in college, and I just started making a few fun phrases and stuff. That was one of the phrases I put on a hat, so I've got it on a black hat, and so
Oh,
next time I
nice.
see it, I can give it to you. But yeah, I think that part of your brain that allows you to be in that flow and recognize these instances of truths, like pressures or privilege. Like most people just like glance at that, whatever, it's like a lot of people have pressure in their lives other than horse tournaments. There's a lot more bigger pressures in life, raising kids or dealing with health issues or watching people struggle and God knows. So it's actually really, really, I think, synchronistic for you though, that you're tapping into these frequencies of things. And that might sound kind of hokey and spiritual, but like, I think it's going to be fun to see because you remind me a little bit of my friend Gibson, who's an older gentleman, who's one of my mentors he's kind of a flyer guy, would always come up with wacky stuff, kind of conspiracy style, but with horses, I'm talking.
Mhm.
But his brain, and funny enough, I texted you yesterday, he's an Aquarius, and you said that you're an Aquarius, and I was asking if you're a Libra or an air sign. And there's something that's really cool about the archetype of an Aquarius is because they can adapt and they can think differently. And so I think that's one of the traits I think it takes to be great at this game, especially the mental acuity. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned it wasn't always this way. So was there like a light bulb that went off for you and all of a sudden you started dropping speed figures or stopped, just betting on horses below a certain number? Did you change your lifestyle? Did you start, cutting things out or spending more time or less time? Like what are some of the best practices that actually made you go from like decent to great?
Um, I always think in probably a lot of different aspects of life, but also like in gambling aspects, certainly poker, horse racing contests, that you need to have a certain level of aggression. If you're not aggressive, it's going to take a lot of things to go right in order for you to win. Um, and I think when I first started playing contests, I was learning that and kind of pressing that more and more. But then I think there was a period where I was close a bunch of times, and then I think I pushed it because I was close and not quite there. I think I took it to an extreme that probably wasn't helpful. In that, like I would go to the BCBC and we have $600 minimums, and I'm just playing, ice cold $600 doubles, back to back races, and those races are insanely hard to get one, much less two in a row. And if I had hit, like, I'm sure it would have been a huge score or whatever, but like after a while in some of these bigger contests, I started to realize that just being very inflexible with my opinions and being super aggressive wasn't the way to go. So I had to dial it back a little bit. And I feel like in 2024, the back half of 2024 is when I started kind of doing that. I don't know if that's an exact correlation to the success coming. But I even like I said, on Friday I messed up because I was inflexible, and once I realized that, I used that on Saturday and it helped me out. It's just one of those things where if you're mindful of it, sometimes you're just not mindful of it, but if you're mindful of it, I think you end up having better results. And I think if you watch poker tournaments, it can be that way where somebody's just like ruthlessly aggressive and it looks cool because like they're just winning with all these wacky hands and stuff, but then eventually that fades away because you've taken on too many risks. So it's just kind of calibrating that, I would say. I think that's helped me out a lot, especially in live bankroll contests.
So did you get more mathematical with it? So did you start slapping probabilities on horses to you and say, all right, because this $600 double only has a 1% chance and blah, 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 and da, da, da. Did you get granular and deep, or did you actually just kind of intuitively figure out a way to have like guardrails on some of your stuff?
Well, I'll use the example from Friday because I mean, it was obviously an example that resonated with me where there was one race during the day where I tend not to have like a ton of singles when I'm like handicapping, doing pick fives, things like that. But there was one race where I just felt adamant that a certain horse was going to win. And I liked a horse that I thought would be like 15, 20 to 1, would kind of follow him around the track. I thought they would just run 1-2 all the way around the track. And so I use that on my entry 2 for online stuff. And I don't think any of that was a bad play necessarily, but it doesn't exactly translate to the live bankroll because that horse that I thought was 15 to would be 15, 21 actually went off at 45 to 1. And if I had just, thrown a little bit of money on that horse who I legitimately thought was going to be second, if I wasn't just so, you know, tunnel vision about, the 3 horse is going to win and the 7 horse will be second, and just consider for the fact that there was a lot of value in putting a little bit of money on that long shot. That would have done me a world of good in that contest. But probably, the best lessons you learn tend to be the ones that are a bit painful. So that was, the next day I was just kind of like, be mindful that a situation like that could occur again. And that's a little bit of what happened with Trendsetter. There were 2 horses in that race that I thought had a little bit of a chance. They were long shots, but I had enough of a bankroll that I could put 250 towards each of them in a double and see how it played out. And it worked out. So.
Yeah, I can relate. Quantitatively, this could be solved by using some math to it. And that's why I definitely would encourage all players to put numbers to everything they do. So that horse on Friday that was 45 to 1 that you thought might be 30, if you put like, a 5% or a 10% or whatever you thought the horse's chances were next to it, and then you saw those odds, it could set an alert to you. And I think that's something that we take for granted, or I take for granted, is we like that main horse in the race, scenario A, and then there's another thing going on in the race, but it's almost like you have to walk through multiple renditions of the race and get clear on where that value actually exists. And sometimes it'll slap you in the face like that, and you're like, I can't believe I didn't have anything, I can't believe I'm making whatever, I'm not making enough. It happened to me in the Breeders' Cup. Actually, there was a situation where I didn't use a horse in first. There was a technical issue with machines at the track. I'm not going to say anything, but that's why I don't go. I've been to the Breeders' Cup once in the last like 12 years, and then things go weird, but that's okay. But it still wasn't native to me, and I have to say that I understand how it's easy to get lost in the lore that I feel so strongly about this horse winning this race, and I'm going to try to cover this and that and blah 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 blah. But what if that horse doesn't run? And what happens if my second opinion comes in, and how can I monetize that? But again, to me, I'm very structured. Like, I don't think most people know this, but I'm extremely structured. Not to the point where I'll use a program like a lot of these guys are doing now. And it's funny because do you just go the window and make your bets in kind of like simple increments, or do you use like a system to try to calculate what you should be betting based on the odds or based on your implied probabilities?
I am extremely simple. So for the Keeneland contest, for example, like we have $2,500 and we're supposed to make 5 bets of at least $400 each, but we have to bet our entire 2,500. And because I don't want to spend time like messing up and getting disqualified or whatever, I just make all those $500 bets. That way, I'm betting my 2,500. I'll do some math on like how I allocate that necessarily, but like, for at least the beginning part of the day, I'm just trying to keep it simple. There's so many things that you have to think about that, to take that off the table just makes it easier for me.
I completely agree. But it's also, I'm so stingy about the way I spend my dollars. Like, I won't play tournaments unless I feel like I have an edge, or I feel like there's a good value at the top. But again, I'm like in my own world, so I don't expect everyone to look at it that way. But I do kind of disagree at the same time because, I mean, tournament anxiety is real. Like it's very real, and people don't even understand the disqualification stuff. I mean, the guy who finished third this year, who I ended up meeting, who was such a nice gentleman, he bet a double, and somehow I guess he doesn't play tournaments enough, and he didn't realize it didn't count. And it's like, I mean, you and I have probably enough pain to know that we will double and triple check the rules just to be sure. But still, like you said, you don't want to be at the window and trying to punch in that last $10. So there's a piece where I will say I will maybe overbet just to fulfill the requirements of a tournament, but every dollar is so precious and sacred that I will not just like overbet, you know. And I actually think that the Breeders' Cup rules are way, way, way out of control. Like, I don't think that there should be that many minimum bets and things. And it's like, it's unnecessary. But I mean, there's such good racing. It doesn't cripple the integrity of it. But I think this whole notion of creating tournaments to give players more anxiety around getting disqualified and not just letting them have free reign. I don't know. Do you feel like that the rules should be minimized? I'm talking cash right now, but
Yeah.
like, do you think that they should be minimized and that players should have more control? Or do you think that leveling the playing field, so to speak, by forcing people to do these long-term bets that could maybe create more churn, but probably not? Do you think that is something you're okay with, or would you rather it shift more to like these $500 express bet tournaments where it's just send it however you want?
I think the majority of players are definitely in your camp where especially with something like the BCBC, where you have to bet 7 of the 9 on day 2, that they feel like that's really a tough threshold to kind of meet and very easy to kind of screw up and, like you said, get disqualified. I get the intent, and I get the intent behind like mandatories at the NHC as well. I think it's supposed to be because those two are like the biggest contests we play in, that they're kind of comprehensive tests that, you know, they don't want you to just like hit one race really big and then win the contest just doing that. There's probably a middle ground. Certainly with BCBC, I think there's probably more of a middle ground on that front. That being said,
how many races do you think the BCBC should force us to bet on day 2?
On day 2, I think 5 out of 9 would be okay.
Yeah, me too.
I'd be, I mean, if it was less than that, I'd be fine too. I think it's just one of those things where, because, you know, not everybody loves the NHC. So I know plenty of people who, you know, the BCBC is like their biggest event of the year. So, you know, if that's the big contest, it should be hard in some respect. I mean, it's plenty hard because the races are so hard, but I don't mind them putting in some hurdles that we have to go over. Yeah, my general view on any contest is that if I signed up for it, I agreed to the rules. So I don't get too upset about, you know, I'm well aware of what I have to do at the BCBC and things like that. But I mean, like Keeneland used to be, you had to bet half your bankroll in one of the last 2 races. That was like, and I was talking about that this past weekend, and there are guys at the table who were talking about, yeah, it'd be fun to do that again. I like all sorts of different formats. I know one year I had to do that. I had to bet like a crazy amount on a race I didn't really like, but I had to do it. But I mean, that in particular is like is a rule that is just asking for people to get disqualified by accidentally doing math wrong and things like that. So, you know, and I've heard, I think that one of the Texas venues has some sort of format like that, but they before that race, they let you know how much you have to bet. So they're kind of doing the math for you, which is great, you know, if you can do that. But yeah, I in general, I welcome all sorts of different formats. It's part of me just being like, it's a new puzzle. I like new puzzles. So
Yeah, I do too. I like challenge. I think we both share that. It's kind of troubling that no one's looking out for the horse player, you know, in general. Like, it's just one of those things where we're the last kind of person on the totem pole when it, obviously the owners and the trainers and the breeders and the jockeys and the regulators, there's so much going on, and it's a great game. And I'm not trying to take away from that, but it would be nice to be treated as an equal. And you did kind of bring up a scab, a little like moment on the show. I don't know if you remember, but when I was at Keeneland and I wore that tail on purpose, and it was blue and it turned blue to honor Dr. Hansen, who literally brought a horse out there with a blue tail, and the blue bloods told him, no, you can't have a horse with a blue tail. If you don't wash out the dye, you're not going to run in the race. So I wore the tail as a joke, and explained it on the show, and they never used it. They just wanted to make me seem weird, which is cool. But in that tournament, and I had the lead the whole day, and then I had to bet 20 or 50% of my money, and I didn't want to throw it on a 70% favorite to come third. So I ended up betting every horse to win in the race, literally every single horse in the race. And then I saw some things shift at the end, and I ended up betting an extra couple $100 on the favorite, and I lost that tournament by like $200. So it was like a $20,000 like hit because of some stupid rule that doesn't make sense to me, just to try to get more money out of horse players. Like I'm so glad that was changed, because the quantity of races, the minimums of the races, the amount, whatever the amount is, like, that's what you're signing up for. But then there's the takeout of the tournaments as well.
Mm-hmm.
So right now it's usually, a third or a little more, depending, 30% to 50%. And that's fine. That's up for them to decide, I guess. But if I look at it, like, there's some interesting conversations that aren't really being had. Like, what if I said to you, when you think about the Keeneland tournament, 309 entries, right? Something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a moment to think about that. 309 entries. Each person is putting in $1,000. That's $309K.
Mm-hmm.
That's put up in the pot, if that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wouldn't you feel like half the pot should be yours for finishing first? Don't you think that you should get 150K for winning that tournament? Doesn't that seem like kind of fair, given that you took the shot, you took the chance, and you're trying to win it?
I mean, now that I won, I will definitely say yes. But no, I definitely get that. I know, always kind of comparing between like this and NHC and BCBC. I know for a lot of people, when you look at the NHC, and there's such a, it's decided by 84 cents this year, but that was over a $500,000 difference. So I don't know that I definitely have like an opinion on whether I think it should be more of the structure like Keeneland or more like NHC, where there's like such a discrepancy like at the top between the amounts that you get. Yeah, I think I'm okay with either. I don't know. I probably would have to think about it a little bit more. I certainly think I'm very biased in this moment answering that question, but
No, but I mean, you don't seem like the kind of guy that's kind of a, like,
I'm not going to BS you on the answer.
No, but I mean, I think you strike me as someone that's fairly objective and clear, and you could answer that question. But I think philosophically, I think that's something that should be in the community, is what percentage of the money that is taken from the players. Keep in mind, these racetracks are not matching. They're not putting money in, right? Creating an amazing experience. Like Keeneland's world class. That was amazing. But where is the range? Because that's basically 25% of the pool that you got to take home for first. And that's a lot of BCBCs, that's like, well, it was 60 something. So 80. So you probably walked with 80K from prize money, right? So that's,
altogether is like 116, I would say. So it's 33 plus 68, which is 101, a BCBC and a KDBC, which is like 10 and 5. So like 116 altogether.
Yeah. So again, about 80 something for winning that in prize money. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it gets interesting to think about is 25% fair? every tournament is different, but does somebody that finishes 6th, 7th, or 8th deserve a BCBC seat or an NHC seat? What are the costs of the NHC seats? Like, where does the line draw on how much money is it worth you to risk your dollars? Because there's a lot of tournaments out there where, like, do you play the express bet tournaments and other tournaments like that?
Every now and then. I probably want to play them a little bit more this year because I know people are going to give me grief about this, but I really feel like I need to get better at my live bankroll stuff. It worked out well this weekend, but I still always feel like there are flaws to work on. And I feel like, certainly the express bet contests that are there would be good practice. Like the cheaper ones would definitely be very good practice for me. So I should be playing them more this year, like post Derby, I would say. But
I mean, it's up to you. Know yourself, right? Know thyself is the number one thing in anything, horse racing included. And if you aren't delivering on your 3-to-1 shots or lower, or second favorites, third favorites, long shots, if you can't find your sweet spot in the regular day to day, then that energy is potentially telling you to, yeah, you got some work to do. I think everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, myself included, but it's just the practice and then deciding in these tournaments, like, where to go all in, which is a whole nother crazy, unheard of skill that, it's not intuitive to decide who to bet all your money on.
mm-hmm.
You have to get the math there, and then you have to decide, like, you like Trendsetter, so you had him and you knew that those favorites were vulnerable, and that's why you played it. So even if you didn't know if for sure that him or the other horse that scratched in that race that you're thinking about, but you saw value. And so
yeah.
It's like taking the time to master ourselves, to understand, when is it worth the money? When is it worth the prize money? When is the horse worth the money? Because I actually feel confident enough to bet 100, 200, 500, 10,000 on a horse. Like, when is that confidence index there? Those are all skills when it comes to cash games. But I do think that, there's some fundamental math that's like hurting the tournament growth industry, because when you're offering a tournament and it takes 8-to-1, 10-to-1 to finish in the top 2 or 3, and you're only, if you're sacrificing $200 for a tournament and the payout is $2,000, you're basically breaking even. Does that make sense? So, like, if you have to play 200 into the pot,
mm-hmm.
and if you're going to play the tournament the right way and get to a number that's roughly 8 or 10x to get the prize money, you could take the 200 and bet it on the side and
Mm-hmm.
get the same amount of money. And I think that that's why I don't understand. And that's one of the big reasons I've stepped away from a lot of tournaments, is because if the tournament directors are not making the incentive to finish in the top 3 with reasonable EV, then just bet it in the pools normally. And you don't have to be forced to bet an opinion just so you can get some ego points. But I don't know how you feel, if that's being too harsh and too picky.
No, I was going to say, Matt Miller has a famous book out where he kind of like, talks about some of the situations that you're talking about in here, and also that he'll play on the side in conjunction with his tournament play. So I think he's kind of like covering both ends of what we're talking about here. I again, like, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible when I'm playing a contest, so I don't really do that. There are all sorts of times where like on Saturday I hit the pick 4, and like somebody had to like remind me that happened, and I wasn't even looking at my, once I got towards the end, I wasn't even looking at my real bets and stuff like that. So I think there's, again, the great thing about this is that people come at it in very different ways. That's one way to kind of cover both sides of it. But but it's yeah, I certainly think it would be cool to have discussions about what types of formats people enjoy, what types of formats maybe we haven't even tried out. I think I think the contest world is growing. You look at the BCBC, like the entries keep going up. NHC, the entries keep going up. I think in the fall, Keeneland was like 270, something like that, somewhere in that range. This time it was 309. So, I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think there are a lot of things about contest play. You were talking about being creative, that you kind of get to explore that creative side of betting, which isn't necessarily there when you're just betting a day at the track. So.
Yeah, I mean, my personal mission is to help bring new people into horse racing if the rules and if the games are designed in a way where I feel that players, can win and compete. I have some ideas around helping people with other tools and other practices and other ways of looking at racing, but we got to stand up for ourselves. Like, the horse players really do need to band together and unite more and, talk as a group about what are the best ways. Obviously, we can't get the takeout down. We've tried for years. That's not happening. And whether or not that's going to bring in new players necessarily is a 5-year plan that no one's willing to take the risk on. So that's a huge problem. That's a 3x takeout compared to traditional sports. So huge hurdle, which is why tournaments are actually very interesting because of what you said, which is this is a new way to play at the track and have a thrill to make a score. And there are some rules, though, I think that would be helpful that we all agreed upon. I think the quantity of races is a big one, and we'll touch on that with the KDBC in a sec. But quantity of races, minimums in races, and prize money distribution. Mm-hmm. Those three things are paramount to growth. And you talk about growth, like, to me, I mean, I've worked at so many startups, and if we weren't growing at 20 to 30 to 40%, VP of sales is gone in 6 months. Like, VP of engineering gone in 3 months. Like, the bar for growth is so much lower. And I don't know if that's just because, everyone is just holding on, like a life raft right now. But yeah. This is we're at this point where I feel like it's one of the reasons I'm coming out talking more, is because I feel like there needs to be more discussions on the intellectual levels. Like, I've seen, the way your brain works a little bit in person and, competing against you. But I do think one of the things to think about moving forward this year is what do these rules look like? And maybe we could even think about drafting, something that kind of sets a tone so that the horse players are not just getting sucked into these dopamine spikes of finishing in the top 5 when they don't really like a bet, and they're just sending it when they could bet the money instead on the side, all of it, and make more money than the tournament too. Like, there's definitely tournaments like that out there that are existing, and it blows my mind that people are still just wanting the kudos from the community. But that's one thing I guess was just kind of bothering me a little bit this week when I was thinking about the payouts of the Keeneland tournament, because I don't know what NHC charges for their seats to these tournament directors. I know on course is different than online, and I know there's relationships, and I know there's all this stuff, but like, I think you deserved 150K, and I'm not saying that to be biased. Like, if it were me, I would have wanted 150K, just based on the hardship it takes to do well. And I won it a couple years ago, but I can't remember exactly what the payouts were, but this is, sit on that. We'll talk more about that. Think about what it takes, because when you're risking $1,000, or 2,000, if you're playing 2 entries, if you're going to win, like my batting average is, right around 10% over the last 10 years. Like, when you start looking at how much you're spending, versus winning, like, I think that's one of the things that's like inhibiting the growth is that most people realize that they're not going to send all that money in to try to win it either, which is kind of contradictory to what I'm saying. But it's at the same time, you shouldn't be playing in the tournament probably if you're, if you're not trying to win it, right? I mean,
yeah, I think one of the tough things, like when I talk to somebody who's a little bit newer at contests, that I try to explain is that it's very natural to want to like keep something at the end to take home, and that there's nothing inherently wrong with doing that. It just makes it harder to win. So like if you fire your shot in the last race, but it was like only a partial shot, and you finish 5th, like that's awesome, but that's probably as high as, I mean, if you hit and that's where you landed, that's as high as you're going to get shooting that much of a shot. And I agree, like especially something like Breeders' Cup, where if you're sitting on 15,000 going in the last race, not everyone's going to want to put 15,000 through the window. You might say, hey, I want a $10,000 seat. I'm taking 10,000 home. I'm going to take my shot with $5,000 and see how it turns out. I think you're talking a little bit about kind of like a game theory optimal kind of way you should play and stuff. It's hard to balance those two things. And I think anytime I at the end of this contest that we just played, I had 1,600 that I could employ in the last race, and I could have went home with 1,600, I guess, but like just felt like like you had said, like you can lose by a small amount, but in prize money, that's $35,000, something like that. If I don't make every best effort to try and win that, then I would go home with regrets. That might not be the case for everybody. Some people might go, hey, I brought home 1,600, I didn't put it at risk, and like I had a shot at winning anyway. So for me, there's only one way to go, but I certainly understand different approaches.
I think you're spot on with the Breeders' Cup. The BCBC, I don't think it matters. I don't think you have to try to play that to win, because the liquidity is so high.
Yeah.
That there's value everywhere. Obviously, getting to the critical mass is the hard part. I was reading something about maybe the additional money is going to like lesser places, than the top 2 or 3, which is a little troubling to me. When I saw an email about that, but it's like, I understand it, because on one end, there's a lot of players that aren't trying to win it. But you want to grow it. And how do you get the bigger bettors? How do you get the people that are poker players? And how do you get the sports bettors that are betting hundreds of thousands of dollars? There was a DraftKings tournament on sports in New Jersey. I think it was probably like 7, 8, 9 years ago. Well, maybe not that long, but I was in there with a little interesting story there. But took a shot, was close, but the prize money was so high, and they matched it. They added there was only like, I think 200 and something players, but the payout was based on like 300 players being in it.
Okay.
So it was just incredible. But there's not a lot of, I think, data that can suggest that if you raise the prize money for first, that you're going to get a ton more players without a good marketing campaign. And so that's why the sport needs players like us and people out there kind of opening their books a little bit, or sharing some of the practices, not necessarily the horses, because obviously we have to keep our cards close to our chest, but like there are certain things that must be done if you're going to compete in anything, sports, yourself, golf, tournaments. And I feel like, there's a breaking point where you have to have the skill. You have to demonstrate over years to yourself that you have that skill, and that you can perform, whatever you're trying to hit. Like, you target a number, you hit the number, just like a VP of sales. If you don't hit the numbers, then look at what the numbers are and find out, is there a way to improve and get better at it? But like, if you can't, know yourself well enough to know what your lane is, then, most people intuitively don't believe they should be going for first. And I would have made more money in tournaments if I didn't go for first in all of my wins. I've looked at 10 to 12 years of study, and but the problem is you learn more, right? I'm learning a little, and the game's changing every single year. There's something a little different. Maybe it's even in the context of going up against great guys like you now that are coming out of the woodwork. So it's like their competition is rising, AI is rising, people are getting more aggressive. Like, how many people do you think in the tournament at Keeneland were trying to win it?
At the beginning or at the end?
Both.
At the beginning, I mean, I know so many people playing these contests now. I would think at least more than half, I would think, were really trying to win. They weren't just trying to get an NHC seat or something like that. At the end, like when we got to the last race and I was kind of going down the list of people like in the top 25, top 30, there are other things in play. So like part of what crossed my mind when I was trying to figure out whether I did enough to get to the top at the end was think about the fact that, most people probably don't have BC seats at the moment. So like I think it was top 6 got BC seats. Like aiming for that 6th spot may have been priority 1 over winning. Like you just, then you have to risk less. You get to take home money. Maybe that's more the goal at this point in the year, because I know personally, like pretty much every year when I get that NHC seat, when I get that BC seat, I exhale a little bit, like that's out of the way now. And I know I'll be playing those events. Those are the biggest events we play in. I always want to play in them. So, maybe I'm a little biased in that, but I tend to think there are many people that think that way as well, where they're just like, I got that out of the way. And now, once you have that out of the way, then later in the year, you can be more aggressive. So at the end, I think, I don't know, maybe like 10 to 15 people going in that last race, especially because it was chalky and you were probably going to have to, make a gigantic bet in order to win. I think there were probably plenty of people that, did some exactas or tries or whatever with long shots and hope that came in. But I would think at the end, probably like 10 to 15 people, I would guess, had a real shot at the end. So.
Yeah, I agree with that logic. I think not that many people are going to, again, when the prize money is only 60K, no offense, there's a point where if that prize money was 150K, if it was 200K, I bet every single one of those, well, maybe 70% of those players would go. You get a 3x probably all in, but I don't know how many of the remaining entries were even in it at that point, but there's probably half or less than half. So it's I would say that, 5 to 10% of people at the end are probably going for it like that. The irony of what I'm saying though is when you say 5 to 10 or 15 players, if 15 players are trying to win that tournament at the end, the probability that they actually represent of winning it is close, probably over 50%.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
If you think about all the exactas, the $5,000 exactas and the $2,000 exactas and the $500 tries, 1%, 2%, 4%, 4%, 4%, you add up 15 times 3% is 45%. So if each of those bets had a 3% chance, so then that's how you got me too. But it's not about you getting me. It's about you taking a strategy that other players are doing too, which is that they want to win it towards the end with the horse that they like or don't like. But the point is, probably about rule of thumb, half the tournaments are going to be won in the last race. It could be higher, especially on certain tournaments like BC maybe, or, when there's a lot more money at stake. But I'm trying to factor all this into my critical thinking. I made a mistake in my tournament. Do you, if you were me, what would you, no, I'm not asking you for what horse I would do different, nothing like that. But when you look at what I did, do you see the mistake that I made?
Not necessarily. It's always so much harder when you're being hunted at the end of the, I mean, it's nice to be in first, But I always tell people, like, in the last race, if you didn't hit, it almost doesn't even matter what came in. Like, anything could beat you at that point. You know, I've been in a position, I was in your position in 2019 in the fall Keeneland contest, where I got to the last race and I was leading and a 20-1 shot came in. And I was like, that's not good. That can't possibly be good. And I was very relieved to find out only 2 people went by me. Like, finishing, I thought I finished like 40th when that horse came in. And I've learned over time that actually the more dangerous scenario is when the favorites come in. Like, you know, when people are betting the long shots, they're in the last race, usually they're further down the leaderboard and they're not betting as much money on them. Whereas, you know, like the horse that won was 9-5, 2-1 in the last race on Saturday. Someone, you bet a 10,000, like in race 7, you bet a $10,000 to win bet on a 2-1 shot, and that's how you got to 30. Something like that could easily happen in the last race. So it's one of those things that you kind of feel out. I think in general, like I said, like if I don't have the last race and I don't have some like crazy lead, I just assume I've lost. And the closer, the more reasonable the outcome that came in, the more trouble I'm in.
Yeah, it's this equation of what is the prize money, what is the number of contestants or entries, where do you stand with your dollars, and most importantly, how much confidence do you have in the probabilities that you're giving those horses? When you say 3-1, can you back it up over time and say, yeah, this horse is going to win 25% of the time? And I can prove that over a year, 5 years, 10 years, right? Showing that you know yourself so well that you know this is not really a decision. Like, even in the last race, I didn't really like the first time starter out of, you know, Klinsman or whatever.
And I apologize. I realized I didn't answer your question when I got rambling.
No, that's okay. But I'll come back to it. So I was just going to say, we make decisions. So I made that decision on a little bit of game theory. I hated the 4, no offense, or whatever came second. I was like, I'm not spending money on that horse. So I'm going to do, I think, a move that will get me to pass anybody who uses the 11 in first. And I still would have finished. I still would have finished second, I think, based on what I did. So that's fine. But the mistake I made was not betting enough money on the first horse. And if you watch my live stream, when I was betting the 10K live, I did some math ahead of time, and maybe I thought he was going to drift up a little more because he was 15-1 morning line, but I really wanted, 14K. I really wanted 14K. And the scratches also threw me off, and I only had a little, I saw the scratches maybe about 30 minutes before that race. So I had to adapt, literally right before, the situation, and cross out some things and go, okay, now I had this extra money, and I had extra money. That's my point, is I should have bet 1,500 on him, because that was the only, having that extra $500 later in the tournament would not have helped me do if I lost the first race. So that's the way I should have, and again, I'm always post-mortem, like and analyzing everything that I could have done different. But that was a fundamental error, because if you watch, and I knew he was going to go off around 2-1. I'm guessing that the problem is when you send 10 grand on a horse these days in one cycle, the CAWs, they don't know about the grade 1 gamble. They think that this is probably some team or who knows what, maybe, I don't know. And the point is, there's chasers, and so maybe the horse would have gone off at 2.2 or 2.3, 2.5, but we'll never know. But my point is, we could probably look at some of the last minute clicks to see if there's, I think Cummings has those data points. But anyway, let's go back to, so I made a mistake. That was on me, and it still happens in no matter how many hours I spend doing this stuff. But the last race, it was more of a desperation, just a little protection, whatever. I'm not going to spend, 1,500, I was almost throwing up in my mouth betting on these horses. So again, the prize money is so low.
Mhm.
I'm not going to risk money to get an extra 25K or 30K from second to first. It's like, how much money do I need to risk to get that, that amount? And it's always fine. You can always justify that there's EV there, but if I don't really feel that confident on it, I'm not going to spend, 5 or 10 grand on a favorite in that race, getting blinkers for the first time with a very questionable form and against, some bad horses. But anyway, so go back to my other question, because I ended up interrupting you shortly after you said that you knew what you wanted to answer. So go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say that, in terms of what you had bet in the final race, if I was in your position, I think part of what I would have been thinking about is like getting to I know it's hard to kind of nail down a number at that point, but like kind of getting to a number that I felt was really comfortable in terms of winning. So, I don't know whether that would be, like 35 or 40 or whatever. My friends always tell me I'm always overshooting. I'm like, oh, if I hit this, then, now I have 60 grand. And they're like, why are you putting all that money, on a single horse? I'm like, well, if I get 60 grand, then I'll win. And, that sort of thing. And again, that's part of me dialing back the aggression a little bit and thinking, hey, the horse I really like will get me to, I mean, in this situation the other day, I was desperately trying to get to 30. It wasn't even like an option where, I mean, I guess there was a way to possibly get to like 35 or 40 or something like that. But like, it just felt like I had limited options and I was just trying to run with that and see where that would take me. I had a similar situation at the BCBC where I was sitting second going into the final race, and I wanted to figure out how to bet the last race, which felt very wide open. And you kind of get into a scenario where you're like, if you think 4 horses are going to win, are you going to make a bunch of win bets on them? Are you going to bet exactas? You're just trying to figure out, there are so many different ways you can go. And I tried to keep it simple, and I just put, a big bet on the horse I thought would win. The horse who I liked second best ended up winning. And then like you said, you're doing the postmortem and you're beating yourself up. Should I have done this? Should I have done that? That was my first time in that situation. So I don't really beat myself up too much as to whether it was a mistake or not. I just think that was always going to be the play for me in that situation. If I'm in that same situation this year, will I play it differently? Sure, because I've kind of gone through that experience, and I have it in my head now. But I try not to kind of like go back in time and pretend I was a different person at that point and would have done things differently. I know how I felt at that time. I was in second at the BCBC. Like you said, there's so much money given away in that event. I was just hoping I didn't drop too far down the standings. And, I went home basically with like 200K that weekend. And that's from missing and dropping down to 6th. That's not a bad weekend at all. If you have regrets about that, then I don't know what to tell you. But sure, it'd be nice if one of these years I was a little more aggressive on that front and had a different outcome. But we'll see. We'll be at Keeneland at the end of October, and I'll get that chance, hopefully.
Yeah, well, you're describing the goals you have, right? And that's the thing, is you don't know your goals sometimes until you're in the goals and you're in the stream of consciousness, and you're like, what I didn't necessarily know that I was going to be second and things like that. I'm a little more, I've evolved in some ways where I don't have to win, even though I'm not happy with second ever. It's a financial decision. It's about the risk and the reward and the accuracy of my probabilities. And I'm trying to tighten my morning line, or my line, I guess. How tight can I get it? And when does it start to vary, when does the variance creep in and leak in? And then there's the game theory stuff. But I think my experiences of feeling some pretty disgusting pains that a lot of people don't know. And this game is so lonely, bro. It's like nobody knows what we go through. I haven't talked to anybody about what I bet on horses in over 12, 15 years. So I don't talk about horse racing with anyone So it's on me to find the way to improve. And you talked about the scenario of being second in the Breeders' Cup. I invite all players to consider the posture of where are you in the tournament? Where are you going to be? What would you do if you were, Dave in second in the BCBC that year? Think about how would you maneuver? I did not have the confidence earlier in the card in a short notice to bet heavy enough to be able to get to like 40K on the live stream. As soon as the horse won, I said, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to win this with 30K. And it was just, so it's not about winning it now. It's like, what's left over? What are the probabilities? And the irony is every single horse I could bet in the last race can give me value. Like if I bet 5,000 on the favorite, or I think it was, about 5,000 or 6,000 to, and this is something I thought about, but it's like, if you do that, I'm getting 7-1 on that horse. And I'm also risking dropping down to third and sacrificing even more money. And that's like this weird massage mental exercise. I'm thinking about, where do I draw the line? Because I really didn't like that horse that came second. Didn't think he was a problem for second, but I'm not going to spend, and again, I could have, whatever, that's not even a word I would want to use, but Brett Wiener had a bigger exacta with the 11, I think on top of the 6. So if the 11 did run, he would have trumped me and I would have finished second again. So even when you have situations, it's like this tournament is so bizarre because of the fact that it's Keeneland. It's good racing. There's not a lot of tournaments right now, 309 entries. People, it's early in the season. Like you said, people want NHC, where they want BCBC, whatever, which is way too many BCBC seats in my opinion. Still, I'm still getting a little more like flustered about the fact that you didn't get 150K and I didn't get 75, but that's fine. But I think 50% should go to the first and 25% should go to second, like every time. Like I'll just throw that out there. But so I guess the takeaway is, get prepared for context, player to player. You are very intuitive and you're a magician and you're able to kind of adapt as you did in that situation. And even in the last race, you were able to close it out. I guess you would have beat me anyway because I bet too much. But again, and that's part of the problem of betting, too much in the last race. But at the same time, there's a lot of other combinations covered with a lot of things, a lot of chalk, a lot of things that could have easily gotten past. So like I said, 50 to 60% of the time you're going to lose in the last race no matter what. And you're going to have to hit it. And that doesn't mean I'm going to have to hit it. That means I might get lucky and hit it, just because I got such a high number. So I guess a couple of the things I wanted to ask you about. What do you have any, obviously we're here to not just riff, and I've met you, this is my third time talking to you, maybe fourth time. What do you think the horse player community, the younger guys out there, the new players, the people that are interested in learning about racing, like obviously let's just think about it in tournaments. We're talking tournaments. Okay. If they're playing tournaments, what tournaments should they play? If they're, let's say, $50-$100 players, smaller players. And then what do you think they should be doing to prepare to play in the tournaments? And I'll let you kind of go wherever you want with that.
Oh boy. Yeah, I'll try to keep it somewhat brief because there really are a lot of different directions that I could go in with that. I'm a guy who plays tons and tons of feeders online. So like getting into the Keeneland contest is via, a $47 feeder into the $240 qualifier into a $3,500 seat. That's just the way I always go about it, because I'm trying to keep it as cheap as possible. I know people who think there's just no way of doing it that way and not blowing through even more money than if you buy in directly. It's worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody.
Have you tracked that over time? Like, it's obviously been working recently, and maybe you've changed some things in your game, which I'm still not totally clear on what you've changed. But when you think about it, in the early years when you started and you were playing 200 or 500, which is more than kind of we were thinking. But when you looked at that, because I ran into the guy Paul who won the NHC a couple years ago, And
Mhm.
he's like, I burned through like 10K trying to get to the NHC again. I'm like, I'm done. This is a waste of my money. It's like, it's not that important to me. And I know my chances are, he's an older guy. He's like, so I'm saying, like, kind of, are you a record keeper? Do you look at like over the course of a year and say, I spent $5,000, 10 grand on feeders or all this stuff? And obviously it's working this year, but have you done that in the past? And did it work in the early parts of your career?
Yeah. I don't break it down as granular as that. What I do is I keep track of how much I deposit into horse tourneys, horse players, and one of my buddies makes fun of me. He's like, he found the withdrawal buttons and how much I took out. I just kind of do it like that, as opposed to, how much I'm spending exactly on feeders and things like that. What I would say is, one of the things that I was bad about, and I think this is probably something a lot of people do, is that if they don't get in on feeders, they end up buying into the qualifier anyway, and that's just like pouring accelerant on the fire. I think that's in a lot of cases. There's the FOMO. I wanted to play this contest. I was trying to get in on the cheap. It didn't work out, but I'm going to buy in because. And again, you might feel like you have an edge. You might feel really good about the track you're playing at, that sort of thing. I think I've gotten much more disciplined in the, like, if I don't make it in, then I'm not playing it. Like if I would love to play the cash games on horse tourneys Friday, Saturday, Sunday every week. There are some weekends where I don't play any of them. Sometimes I make it into one of them. And hopefully I do well enough to kind of like pad my balance and all that sort of stuff. But I've definitely adapted the point of view that, I pretty much have to earn my way in. If I don't make it through the feeders, then I'm not buying into that contest. I don't know how many people are as strict about that as I am. But that's just kind of what I've set for myself. As far as like, if you're just doing like a $50 kind of contest, I think people ask me whether I like mythical or live bankroll better. I tend to think I'm better at mythical. I just feel more comfortable playing mythical. I'm trying to get better at live bankroll and play tons of stuff. But I would say people should kind of get a feel for what they like better, and then, test out that ground. Don't try to test out everything. Try to, play small. Like there's a $12 cash game on horse tourneys that I know lots of people play. Like, play that and see how well you do in a mythical cash game, and kind of roll with it. And a lot of this is feeling comfortable with your method. I think you said that, being true to yourself. I can't go to the paddock and look at a horse and tell you whether he's going to run well or not. I have no idea. I'm the nerdy numbers guy, and that's served me well. And if there comes a time where it doesn't serve me well, then I'm probably going to lose money in this game left and right, because I won't be able to adapt to like the physicality portion of it. But I think one of the problems you can run into is when you try to do too many different things. Like if you're trying to figure out pedigrees, and I use elements of that when I handicap, but I know, I sit down at a table at NHC or Keeneland or whatever, and I feel like I'm sitting with somebody who's better than me at this part of the game than this part of the game. And you just go around the table, and, hopefully there's one part of the game I'm better at, and that works out for me today. But, I don't try to be great at everything. Just try it out, see what works for you, and just keep pushing that edge when you find that edge.
Yeah. I mean, you're a humble guy. I respect that about you. I think, you say that, and I think you're probably a lot better than most people sitting at the table next to you. No offense. And when you're with what you've done, it's unparalleled. So, I think if I were to talk to the younger guys, and I really encourage them to think about this game, because I do believe it's better than sports betting. I think it teaches you a lot about life, a lot about spirituality, about yourself, about boundaries, about, lying to yourself. So many horse players, do not understand what they're doing, and they don't understand what they're getting great at and what their true math is. I've seen some people post, picks, and track it and show the double digit losses. And 30%, what the average horse player is losing 30%. It's probably more for, most of the guys. So if people are going to be paying to play these tournaments, I feel like there needs to be a better way to get them ready to understand, their internal math. And I think that's something that if you ask somebody if it's a good bet or a bad bet, at 4-1, a lot of times people know, they kind of know that, right? You know, like, oh, that's a, but also like with your horse on that Keeneland from earlier last year, the horse went off at 45. Some people will be like, whoa, I thought 20 would have been okay. And now he's 45. I'm going to stay away because maybe the barn doesn't even like this horse at all either. And it's like trying to find these paradoxes. It's just ridiculous. Like you may, like I was talking to Shu on the show the other day, a couple of days ago, and he was like, yeah, if a horse gets bet, I'm going to bet it more likely now that I know that the horse is getting bet. And I'm most of the time the opposite, or it just depends. But I think there's these hard rules that people use, and everything is so contextual. And it's just, I do think that there's a learning curve that can happen for less money in tournaments, which is good. So in a way, you can start tracking yourself through betting less money, which is why I think tournaments are really helpful for that. If you don't have software, if you're not trying to put some stuff in your phone or your spreadsheets. But I think that's the one thing I would start to understand about yourself as players. And I'm speaking to the players out there. Like, if you want to get better, then you have to do the work. You have to know what you're good at, what you're not. I mean, there's so many people I know building models and tinkering and trying to get better at this and that. And some people have different goals. Some people want to just try to break even and get a rebate and try to be a CAW or a baby CAW. And then some people want to be CAWs. And my God, we all know that they're the Antichrist. And, like Jelko and Dr. Nick and Dominic, like these guys are it's absurd. So you're literally going head to head against hedge funds. And if you're going to do that, you're going to have to outsmart them. If you're in a tournament and the prize money is high enough, like on the BCBC, you can actually hang. But the odds drops is becoming more difficult. That happened to me recently in a tournament that cost me a tournament because I wouldn't have bet the horse if I saw that odds drop. But I'm not here to complain. I'm here to actually like inspire people to think differently. So know exactly what you're good at. Yeah. Don't bet anything that you're not good at. And if you are going to bet at something you're not good at, make sure you understand the variance of where you are. If you're really, really bad at 4 and 5-1 shots and they just don't win, and you can look at your records and kind of go through it, then, maybe you're just not built for those types of analyses. And so I think we all have to know, like you said, when you're sitting at that table and you're talking to these guys and you see some people that are better at turf or 2-year-olds or claiming or whatever it is, and, they say that, they'll shout it from the tops of the mountaintops and they'll put lipstick on pigs. But like at the end of the day, they know if they do the work, what they're good at. And that's where we are now in this industry. There are ways for you to track yourself and get better at your strengths and weaknesses. And with AI and all these other things, people can use tools to help them get smarter so that they can have more discipline. And that's one of the things that I think is really important, is that players can walk away. And even though I showed discipline, and it's so funny you talked about aggression right away, I have no problem. Aggression is a strong word for it too, but like, is it really aggressive to bet a 10K amount of money on a horse that you like?
If you've never done it before, it definitely is. The first time you do it, it'll feel weird the first time you do it.
Yeah, I mean, I bet 25 grand on Diamond Rain and Baeza in the Breeders' Cup, and I was a little uncomfortable, but it was more because it's like I didn't have another move to get to where I wanted to go. But this is the paradox of all this. It's like you got to be right, but you can't be too right. You can't always go with the way, like you said, you can bet a horse that you think is your second choice. And if there's more value there, then don't necessarily assume your favorite's going to win and walk away from the better value. How do you maneuver with a game that's probably going to be won in a tournament half the time by randomness and somebody just, taking a shot, and whether they like the horse or not. And that's what I hate about that, is like a lot of times people, like, you liked Trendsetter. So to point, and you tied it to another race.
But he definitely wasn't my top pick in that race, or by any means is.
Yeah.
But
But he couldn't be.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, but that's true value play.
Yeah.
That's what profitable horse players do, is they bet the horse that has better value, that isn't going to make in flex and give them a dopamine spike on who they think is going to win. Like, everybody loves to be right, but I don't even understand it. Like, why do you care if your top horse wins if you're not winning money? Like, I don't get the logic. I don't get the feels. It's just, it's super uncomfortable. And I find it, interesting watching the decisions that players are making in the tournaments. I'm seeing a lot of, like, really, heavy chalk still bet, and I'm blown away. Just it literally, it's number one, it's coming from a place of cowardice, because you have to bet on horses that other people are supporting. You can't step away. That is, to me, the definition of cowardice is if you can't go against the grain and stand up for yourself or what you believe in, or you're thinking independently, there's a frequency that is linked to insecurity. And then the math is obvious. So to me, there's chalk players that are continually feeding these prize pools. And it's interesting to watch some of them get, run through money. How many players have we seen lose hundreds of thousands of dollars playing chalk? And it's like, at some point, hopefully the racetracks and us as players can come together and create a bigger and better tournament structure that can invite in more players. Like, I even have some more ideas around that we can save for another time, but I know we're going long here, but either way, I think that there's some practices in your intuition. You've gotten here. It sounds like you have the math, like, buried in your brain, and so forth, but it will be interesting to see this year. If we go toe to toe again in a situation, because
who's going to do better in the Derby betting challenge? We got to know.
I mean, do you have your Derby selections?
No. I mean, I will say this is definitely a year where I think there will be value, because it just feels like so many horses are about the same. And in a 20 horse field, some horses are going to get lost in the betting and some are going to take a ton of money. So, I won't be on whoever ends up being the top two favorites, I would imagine, probably won't be on my ticket, but I'm actually going to the Derby. It'll be my first time ever going to the Derby. So
I'll be out there too.
Oh, nice. I'm looking forward to the experience. My buddy has one of the contenders in the Oaks, and I'm hoping she wins and that we all get to celebrate together. So.
Yeah, that's actually really exciting. The Oaks is chaos. I will say that I'm a bit of a fanatic. If horse racing is a cult, I definitely drink the punch, and to the point where I'm thinking about things, way too early. So I'm pretty locked in right now. So I can't necessarily say what I'm going to do, but for obvious reasons if I'm in a tournament, but I would give myself, I don't know, pretty good shot, 8 to 10% per entry in the KDBC, but we'll see if the horses show up, because there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then and whatnot. But I'm definitely interested in getting people's opinion on the Derby this year, like, for fun, and thinking about a way to do that. But we can, we could, not that you have to say it, but do you have a number in mind for the KDBC, given that it's going to, it's 5K is the buy-in?
I've never actually played it before. I think I read the rules once since Saturday, because I was like, oh, now I'm playing in this contest. I'm trying to remember. I know Frank Massari won it last year, and I forget exactly what his total was, because I know
it was in the 60s. It was around 60, 65, something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sounds, I generally think a higher multiple when it's a lower buy-in. So, you know, at BC, you might only need somewhere in that 15 range. So maybe I would actually think 50 to 60 I'm gunning for. And it's one of those things where like I'll have a number in mind at a contest, and it doesn't matter what anybody hits early on until that number is exceeded. I don't worry about it. So like if I was thinking last week 30 was the number and you were at 29 after one race, it wouldn't have bothered me at all, because they're like, not at 30 yet. Whereas I think a lot of players like see, you know, we're all sitting at 2,500 and somebody's at 29 grand, and they just think like that person's just going to keep, you know, going up throughout the day. You know, that'd be nice, but most of the time it doesn't work that way. So yeah, just spitballing, I'll probably have like 60,000 in mind as the number I need to be concerned about. And then, you know, and you get a feel as the day goes on, you know, maybe you adjust that number. But no, I'm looking forward to playing it, looking forward to the experience, and we'll see if I can conjure up some magic again.
Well, that was magical. It was cool. And I can say that the horse was hard. You delivered not only once, but you delivered twice. Actually, you could say it 3 times. So to me, that's why you deserve to win. All those things combined is very difficult. So massive respect. I do want to rub it in your face when I finish ahead of you next time. So
I'm here for it. Absolutely.
And
I'm definitely here for this like mini rivalry. Let's do this.
You're too nice anyway for me to like, you know, talk too much smack to you. But I mean, I think that
my friends that I sit with also know that they can bust my balls more than most people, because I tend to laugh at everything. So yeah, that I'm okay with it. It's fine.
It's a coping mechanism, which is a good coping mechanism to have, versus getting mad or, you know, complaining or being a pity party or whatever most, you know, horse players do. But it's also kind of a Jedi mind trick, because it's like kind of Tom Brady style, where, you know, like in the media, oh, Aaron Rodgers is you know, is bound for the Hall of Fame, and he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks, you know, he's going to be the toughest out this week, and blah blah blah. And at the end of the day, you know that he thinks he sucks. And I'm not saying that you think I suck or that you think other people suck, but the humility it's a good frequency to have in general with these things. I could definitely have a dose of humility, just to make sure that I don't get too full of myself. But I definitely treat every single tournament like it's war. It's like people have no idea to what extent I go to try to win these tournaments. And it's not inside information. I don't even read. I don't use figures. I make my own figures. I make my own stuff. This isn't about edges on information. It's about critical thinking, and it's about trying to interpret, you know, value. And I think that's something that over time, you know, we can bring more people on. I want to bring other horse players on to get into certain aspects without revealing angles and things that are very important to them. But it is it's a beautiful game. You're in a very special place. So I'm really happy that someone like you is a competitor, because it makes it fun. And now that I know you, you know, we're gonna make this rivalry work. So just yeah, if you see me out there and if you're doing well, you know, just know that I'm not, you know,
that you're coming for me.
I'm not going for the leg, you know, or the abdomen. I'm going for the throat. And it's not even about you. It's about exercising the elegance of the predictive models and trying to predict something to happen exactly in that way. And your ability to do this in the mythical blows my mind. So I just I think it's cool that you've got yourself. That's why I wanted you to come on, and you can come on whenever you want, because I think anytime you have something to talk about, players look up to you. You have earned what you've received. So let's take it to the KDBC. Let's show that a 1-2 finish reversed is the true.
Just let me take the lead, and you can get me at the end. How's that? Let me have the lead most of the day.
I have opinions in the Derby, so it'll be exciting. But yeah, man, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for spending, you know, as much time as you did. And, you know, if you come out to Del Mar, San Diego, you can reach out to me. I'm going to be bouncing around a lot this year and whatnot. But if you ever want to come back on, we can talk more about it. So
Cool. Thank you for having me on tonight. I appreciate it.
Yep. Safe travels of the Derby. I'll give you some tips when you're out there too. So reach out.
Cool.
All right, brother. Peace.